It's time to join Montana's very own and your voice for agriculture, Talkin' Ag Lane Nordland, for today's LaneCast.
Hello everybody, Lane Nordland here with the LaneCast Ag Podcast in conjunction with the Western Ag Network. Thanks for joining the agriculture conversation here today. I kind of feel like the Swedish chef on the Muppets, because we're going to have a smorgasbord of a show here today. We're going to be talking about news items impacting the livestock industry here in the United States, throw in some local livestock markets, some production sales as well going on this spring. But really our top story here this week is dealing with a fire at a beef packing plant in Kansas that occurred this week. That's going to be our top story. A few other items that we're going to cover today includes a vote in the U.S. Senate to reverse the Biden USDA's decision to allow imports of beef from Paraguay. And a fresh cattle on feed report came out on Friday. We'll break down those numbers. And again, we'll recap how the cattle markets did this week and those local markets along with that as well. But as I mentioned, the top story for our conversation here today comes out of Kansas with a fire at a national beef packing plant. That really is the talk of the countryside here this weekend. A truck was parked in the loading dock at the National Beef Facility in Liberal, Kansas, and it caught fire at 9:50 p.m. this past Wednesday, March 20th, 2024, and it spread to other trailers and a portion of the loading dock, according to a statement from the company. The National Beef Company statement went on to say the facility was operating at the time of the fire and was evacuated for the safety of employees and others on site. Emergency services extinguished the fire within a couple of hours with no injuries reported, but the fire primarily affected their reefer, their refrigerated aspect of the beef packing plant, and it's really not anticipated to significantly disrupt production. It was closed down over the past few days, but production at the Liberal, Kansas facility is expected to resume this coming Monday, March 25th, as authorities need the time to determine the cause and assess the damage and prepare for restarting production there at the facility. Now, this plant has a daily fed beef harvesting capacity of 6,000 head. And National Beef said it was grateful for the quick response from the local fire department, police department, and other emergency services. But we cannot turn our backs to the memories of back in 2019. And you may be saying, what happened in 2019, Lane? Well, I think we all know what happened in 2019 in the same state there in Kansas when the Tyson Fresh Meats facility in Holcomb, Kansas burnt down. And that caused an extensive shutdown at the beef plant and a drop in market prices, a severe drop in market prices. And so this fire in Liberal, Kansas definitely caused some fear across the beef industry, and that was evident in the cattle futures this week as well. The futures market was impacted by the news, and that was all despite a higher cash cattle trade that we saw. And I'm not going to call this a black swan event, but more of a fox in the henhouse event. It gave traders something to balk at, and in return, it gave them an opportunity to turn these cattle futures lower. And they'll also say they took into consideration the cattle on feed report to maybe have a more bearish look on the markets. But I don't believe this is a black swan event. We'll see what the investigation pulls, but more of a, as I mentioned, a fox in the hen house, anything to give the traders an ability to drive these markets a bit lower. But I think we're going to have a strong market here over the next few months as we've had over the past year or so. But from that side of our conversation today, before we get to the livestock markets, we should point out that on Thursday, the U.S. Senate passed a resolution to block Paraguayan beef imports into the United States, and this resolution came in response to a USDA rule that lifted the longstanding ban on Paraguayan beef imports, despite the country's concerning animal health track record. Now, this vote in the Senate that did pass this past week was applauded by groups like the National Cattlemen's Beef Association and U.S. Cattlemen's Association, RCAF USA. The resolution was brought forward by Senator John Tester of Montana. He's a Democrat, and a Republican from South Dakota, Senator Mike Rounds.
You know, Senator Rounds comes from South Dakota. I come from Montana. These are both states where we raise a lot of beef. And if you come from a state like that, you understand how catastrophic lifting the ban on Paraguayan beef is. It is not a good idea. In our states, lifting this ban is not supported by Democrats, it's not supported by Republicans, and the reason is pretty simple. The impacts that lifting this ban has on operations, ranching operations, and our food security is real, and it's very, very, very serious.
The senator said that USDA has not used updated science when making its decision to allow imports of beef from Paraguay.
The truth is, the administration butchered this decision. I have serious concerns that Paraguay does not currently meet the animal health standards that are in place to warrant access to our markets.
Paraguay last reported cases of foot and mouth disease in 2012. The USDA's decision to resume Paraguayan imports relies on an analysis that was completed in 2018, but American inspectors have not conducted a site visit to Paraguay since 2014. The United States has not had a case of foot and mouth disease since 1929. We want to keep it that way by reversing this rule until a working group has had an opportunity to evaluate the threat to food safety and animal health posed by Paraguayan beef with an updated analysis. In other words, what we're asking for is for the Department of Ag here to protect our food supply for consumers by making certain that they use the most updated information possible before they allow Paraguay to begin importing beef here.
Now, having passed the U.S. Senate, the resolution now goes to the House of Representatives for further consideration. And cattle organizations like the NCBA and U.S. Cattlemen's are urging the House to vote in favor of the resolution and send it to the president's desk. But earlier this past week, the White House released a statement expressing opposition to the tester rounds resolution, but stopped short of threatening a presidential veto. But of course, we'll continue to track how that resolution moves through the House, and if in fact President Biden would sign that. His administration has been adamant they were not going to reverse their decision to lift that ban on Paraguayan beef. Western Ag Network, we've talked with Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack quite a bit on the subject, and they have not changed their opinion on that as of this broadcast. Hey friends, don't go too far. We'll take a look at what those cattle markets did this week on the cash end of things, the futures board, and of course take a look at some of the seed stock sales and our local livestock markets. We'll have more here on the LaneCast Ag Podcast after this.
If you're involved in transporting cattle, now is the time to get your Beef Quality Assurance Transportation Certification. This is a proven way to learn and adopt the best practices in animal care and transport, from the ranch to the feed yard to the processing facility. And it's important for everyone in every part of the beef cattle industry to do things right to show consumers we all care about beef quality. There are new BQA transportation training modules available online now. And best of all, it's free to become BQA Transportation Certified. It's the right thing to do for your business and for our beef industry. To find out more and to get your BQA Transportation Certification, visit the website bqa.org. The Beef Quality Assurance Program is funded by the Beef Checkoff.
Well, as we come back to the LaneCast Ag Podcast here today with our smorgasbord show, as I'm calling it, just throwing a lot into the pot and seeing what sticks here today. This past Friday, the latest cattle on feed report was released by USDA, and it shows that cattle on feed here in the U.S. as of March 1st totaled 11.8 million head. The inventory was 1% above March 1st of 2023, according to the department. In that report, we saw that placements in feedlots during February totaled 1.89 million head, 10% above 2023. Placements were the highest for February since the series began in 1996. Net placements were 1.83 million head as well. And marketings of fed cattle during February also came in 3% above last year at 1.79 million head. Well, as expected, we mentioned those are the highest placement levels since 1996, and pre-report analysts' expectations were anticipating about a 6% higher trend over last year for those placements. But as I mentioned, that was in fact a little bit higher, 10% higher in fact. And this may seem to be pretty bearish, but our friend Shaylee Stewart, a DTN livestock analyst, wrote on Friday that with the challenges of January this year and the greater feeder cattle imports that we've seen thus far, and just the weather challenges we've had in feeding here in the early part of 2024 with that early on cold weather, placements in February being higher was inevitable, and the market shouldn't be taken back by the findings, but she is expecting traders to take that 10% increase in placements and trade the live and feeder cattle futures a tad bit lower this coming week, just because they can. Just a little bit of bearish news, it seems they can drive them lower. No different than the fire that we were just talking about there in Liberal, Kansas. That took an opportunity to drive those markets quite a bit lower as well. But from there, of course, we mentioned that the cattle futures this past week were a tad bit lower in regards to that fire that occurred at the National Beef Plant in Kansas, but then also we're expecting that this could have a bearish reaction for a few days on the live and feeder cattle futures. But it's important to note that we had really good cash cattle prices this week. Southern live cattle were $2 higher than the previous week at $188. Dress cattle $4 higher at $302, but all of those positive factors with the cash cattle trade just couldn't outweigh what the marketplace was feeling. Let's take a look at what those live cattle futures closed out to be. They were down $1.60 for the June live cattle at $182.90. August down $1.77 at $181.50. Feeder cattle also tucked its tail and ran a tad bit lower, down $3.12, in fact, in April. That is lower at $251.50. May down $4.30. Woo, at $253.77. This smorgasbord show gets a little spicier as we go, looking at those markets from last week. But hey, one thing we can't deny is just what these cattle are bringing, not only in our local livestock markets, but also in our seed stock production sales that are going on here this spring. The Vermilion Ranch out of Montana had a big week there. Of course, they were having their bull sale this week, their spring bull sale, in addition to their commercial replacement heifer sale. Let's look at the bull results first, where yearling bulls there at the Vermilion averaged $8,303, 443 head selling, with the top bull being lot 113 going for $50,000. Now, in addition to the bull sale, earlier in the week, the Vermilion commercial replacement heifer sale took place. They offered over 5,273 head of commercial replacement heifers. Again, they've been picked through, and these are high-end fancy heifers. They averaged $2,176 per head. And also our friends there at Lisco and M. Diamond Angus, they held their bull sale this past Friday at the ranch near Glen Rock, Wyoming. 15 older bulls averaged $8,816. 87 yearling bulls brought $6,378. Lot number 10 was the top bull, selling for $14,500. Now let's look to our local livestock markets there. Let's start with Torrington Livestock. They had two sales this week. Looking at their feeder sale, steers under 600 pounds were steady to $7 higher. Steers over 600 pounds were steady. Let's look at the 5.5 to 6-weight prices. They were priced at $3.30 up to $3.57, with these 6.5 to 7-weight steers $2.93 to $3.07. You can see all the other prices and the weight ranges there on your screen as well if you're watching with us here today. Heifers there in Torrington weighing 520 to 5.5, $3 to $3.13, 610 to 640, 8 weights, $2.80 to $2.97. Later in the week there, Torrington Livestock saw slaughter cattle trade $2 to $4 lower, priced at $111 to $163 a hundredweight on those fleshier high-end cows. Slaughter bulls were trading steady with prices, $142 to $163 for slaughter bulls there in Torrington. They also had a few bred cows. Prices for the 2 to 4-year-old bred cows, $2,450 up to $3,200. 5 to 8-year-old bred cows, $2,300 up to $27 3/4. Now let's go to La Junta, Colorado, to La Junta Livestock Commission, where the trend for those steers under 600 pounds, $7 to $10 higher. Anything over 600 pounds, just like Torrington, that market was steady in that weight range. The 5.5 to 563 weight steers, $322 to $340. The 560 to 575 weights, $304 to $311. The 6.5 to 673 weights, $258 to $286. And heifers weighing 639 to 648 there in La Junta brought a price at $251 to $256. And I don't want to keep you here too much longer. Appreciate you joining us here on the LaneCast Ag Podcast. Let's look to the public auction yards, Billings, Montana, where the trend for feeder cattle, mostly $5 to $10 higher. The 5.5 to 570 weight steers, $327 to $347. The 6 to 642 weights, $301 to $321. 6.5 to 7 weight heifers, $255 to $273. 7 to 740 weight heifers, $241 to $258. Slaughter cows went for $110 to $133 there at Pays, with the slaughter bulls seeing a price of $112 to $149 a hundredweight. Again, a lot of topics that we covered here today in our weekend livestock market recap. I guess we could call it that, or our smorgasbord show on what's going on in the livestock business here in the western United States. And whether that's a county away, a state away, or just right down the road, we're happy to have you join us here today. If you haven't done so yet, friends, subscribe to wherever you're watching or listening to this conversation. Maybe it's YouTube. Maybe it's YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is. Share, subscribe, and we'll continue to share these conversations. Of course, we share these important markets and information that impacts farmers and ranchers every single day on the Western Ag Network in 9 Western states. And I tell you what, we are reaching over 100 stations in these 9 states, and that's our bread and butter, radio and TV. But to bring you these conversations on our social media platforms, it's a joy, and I need to wrap up today's report so I can get out and maybe go help my father-in-law calve. Maybe I should do that so I can wear my cowboy hat and say I'm a cowboy. I'm not a real cowboy. I BS for a living to pay for my cows. How about that? Just like the Swedish chef there on the Muppets. That's how I'm feeling right now. But I probably just lost some followers with those comments. They're like, the Muppets? Why is this guy bringing up the Muppets? Well, that's what happens when I don't have a time limit like I do on TV and radio, and I can just talk endlessly. Well, we're going to wrap that up. Thanks for joining us here today on our Smorgasbord Show. I'm Lane Nordlund. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to the LaneCast with Talkin' Ag, Lane Nordlund. For more on Lane, check out his Facebook page, Lane Nordlund Ag Broadcaster, and NordlundCommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the LaneCast on your Apple or Android devices. We look forward to joining you next time on the LaneCast.